Well, good morning. This is Mima. On last week's video, I shared with you how someone had agreed with me in prayer that Fred would become saved regardless of what it took, short of injury or death. But I really didn't know what we were praying. But in 1965, when Lisa was 5 years old, I really wanted to move from where we were living in the downtown area because she was getting older and she didn't have any neighbors to play with. And we had a park, but I didn't want her to go there by ourselves. I wanted her to have friends. So Fred had heard about this opening as a head security guard out at one of the local plants, and he applied for the job. And so we prayed fervently that he would get the job because he was well qualified for it. And that way we would have more family time together. So he pulled every string he could and had everybody calling, and I just knew he was going to get the job. And we started looking for houses, and I couldn't find anything I liked, nothing I liked that we could afford. And we had plenty of time after he got the job to have done that, but we were just so sure he was going to get the job, we'd already started looking. Well, guess what? He didn't get the job. Now, to say I was disappointed and disillusioned because I had prayed, we had everything going for us, why didn't we get the job? But anyway, it was one of those disappointing things that happened to it. So I said, well, just put on my big girl pants and just live where I was and be happy and serve the Lord the best I knew how. So that's what I decided to do. And it wasn't only about a week later that we had carried Rebecca home after her visitation with us, and we were riding around in close to her neighborhood, and we found this house, and it was for sale. And it was a bungalow, and it was brick, and it was nice, but it wasn't really fancy or anything, but I liked it. It was pretty and clean. And I said, now that's the kind of house I would have liked to have had. Fred said, well, let's go look at it. I wouldn't even go look at it. I thought, we can't do it. We got to stay in the bonding business. We got to stay downtown, so I'm not going to go look at a house. But he did, and the next day he called the real estate agent, and we got an unbelievable deal on a house. I mean, it had been paid on for 14 years. So it had that much equity in it, and all they were asking was $1,000. And we had $2,000 in our savings at that time. So we took $1,000 and put it down, and then we had $1,000 to fix it up. And I had the cutest little place you ever saw. It was so cute. And I praised God for it. So we had a place for Lisa, and the school was real close by, so that was another plus. But I have noticed in my walk with the Lord how He orchestrates things in advance for us to walk in, but I didn't know it at the time. But Fred had told me, he said, if you'll go somewhere else to church, I'll go with you. Well, I didn't know if he would or not because he'd never gone with me to church when I thought he would. And the Lord says, isn't it worth you giving up a job at the teaching at this church to hopefully that he'll go with you, even if you do lose your friends? So I said, okay, we'll do that. So I gave up my job. He met somebody in the bonding business that their preacher had to come down and help in the situation. They had an accident or something. So he met a preacher that he really liked, and he invited him to come to the house. And so he came to our house, and I met him. And in between the time that I gave up my teaching job and before we started going to the new church where he was the pastor to visit, Lisa had started school, and she came in one afternoon and she said, Mom, she said, I can't see. And I said, well, no wonder, honey, it's getting dark outside. The street lights are already on. And so I didn't think anything more about it, went to bed. And so the next morning I was brushing her hair, and she said, Mom, I can't see my eyes. And that disturbed me. And so I picked up a Guidepost magazine, and it had a funny looking G, but she knew her ABCs when she was starting first grade. But she couldn't tell it was a G, so that really disturbed me. And I went and told Fred, and he said, oh, don't get up, so you're going to have her where she can't see you, making a mountain out of a molehill. And so I sent a note with her to school to tell the teacher she couldn't see, but she just started. And so that was like on Friday. And the next day was a Jewish holiday, and she was going to be out of school, and so she went to work with Fred down at the office, and he called me up a frantic. He says, Lisa can't see. What am I supposed to do? You know, she's coloring all over the paper, and at 6 years old, she could color real good. And so I told him, you know, to call the top ophthalmologist there in Savannah, and he did. And then I didn't hear from him. All day long, I didn't hear from him. And so I was worried, but we didn't have cell phones, and I called the office time and time again, and they hadn't heard from him. So it was not until about 7 o'clock that night he came home. He had been in the doctor's office all day long. They did not know what was wrong with Lisa. They had run every test imaginable, and they thought that she might have optic neuritis, but they did not know for sure. So he came home with her, and we were to check in the hospital there in Savannah. So we went into the hospital, and they ran a bunch of tests on her. And so Fred was beside himself. And we about got her settled down after our test, and he was there motioning for me at the door. Come here, you know. And so I go outside with him, and he says, now where's your God? Here's our daughter in there. She's lost her eyesight, and we don't know what's wrong with her. And where is your God now? Well, this is the first time I ever really stood up to Fred. I said, look, I said, I don't know what you're going to do. I said, but I am going to pray to my God that he makes my daughter well. And with that, I turned around and left him in his own private hell, and I went back in and spent the night with Lisa. Well, the next day we talked with the doctors, and they advised us that we needed to take her somewhere other than Savannah. They said there'd only been 4 cases of optic neuritis that they'd ever heard of in the United States at the time. And that there were people that had forgotten more about optic neuritis than they ever knew. And they advised us to go somewhere else. And so I thought, well, where should we go? They said either Miami University or Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Well, y'all, I'd hardly been out of the state at this time, and I didn't know what to expect. And, you know, we didn't have a phone to see what the weather was in Baltimore. So I didn't know if I was supposed to dress for Miami with beach clothes or Baltimore with winter clothes. And it was like in September. And so I asked the doctor, I said, well, where would you go? He said, wherever I could get an appointment. So we got an appointment at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, which is located at the University of Miami. So we took off for the University of Miami. And there was a supernatural peace that came on me. I knew that God was in control. Don't ask me how I knew. I just knew. And I knew that this was God's way of getting Fred's attention. How I knew that, I don't know. But poor Fred, his chin trembled from Savannah to Miami. He was so upset about Lisa losing her eyesight. And there was a double rainbow, most intense rainbows I have ever seen. And to me, that was a promise that God was looking after everything and everything was going to be all right. But for Fred, he didn't even know that. And so it didn't give him any comfort. So we went to Miami, and we had no money. So we went with a gas credit card, Phillips 66 gas credit card, and $100 from his sister. And then a promise from one of Fred's wealthy friends there in Savannah, Fred, if you need anything, write a check and I'll cover it. So that's how we went to Miami. So we went down there, and Dr. J. Lawton Smith was our doctor. He was the head doctor there at Miami University Hospital. And so he told us exactly what he was going to do, what the diagnosis was, what the treatment was going to be, and told us the tests that they would run. And as he was talking, he was dictating it into a machine. I mean, I've never seen anybody so proficient in all my life. So we went to the hospital and got Lisa checked in, and then they told me I couldn't spend the night with her. Well, now, I wasn't about to leave the hospital because this was my daughter and she had lost her eyesight. But Lisa says, that's okay, Mom. I'll be all right. Just turn on the television where I can see it. So here was a 6-year-old daughter comforting her mother who was beside herself. And I knew that God gave me peace that she was going to be all right. So I was able to go back. So we spent every day there, and for a week, and they ran every test imaginable on her. But it was just the optic neuritis, and that the doctor decided that they were going to treat her with massive doses of steroids, which was unheard of at the time. And he said, we don't know what will happen. Said it may cause her to have a balloon face. We don't know if it'll go back down. We don't know if it's going to work. She might get her eyesight back in one, but we just don't know. So we spent a lot of time praying, and God is so good. He's faithful. One of my best friends had just recently moved down there, and she came to see me, and I had a cousin that was there, and I got telegrams, and I got cards, and I knew people were praying, but Fred, none of that was a help to him. So we stayed down there, and we ate at this little greasy spoon, like for 60 cents a piece, for breakfast and lunch. And so about Thursday, we were really hungry for some decent food. And we asked the woman at the motel, said, where should we go to get food? And she said, well, there's a seafood restaurant and a steakhouse down on so-and-so. So we went down there, and I looked at it, and I said, Fred, I don't think we can afford either one of these. He said, come on, we're eating one night. So we went to the seafood restaurant. And while we were in there, the tables were real close together, could just walk by. So it was almost like we were sitting with this couple that was next to us, and Fred had never met a stranger, and of course they started talking, and he was a policeman, and Fred used to be a policeman, so they had that in common. Where were they going to the dog races? Why were we in there, and we told him about our daughter. And then he said, well, the waitress is from Savannah. So, it was like old home week, and it was wonderful to have somebody to take our minds off of our problems for a little bit. And so they got up and wished us well and told us goodbye. And so soon we finished up, and we called the waitress for the check. And the couple had already paid for it. So I knew God was looking out for us, and that blessed me so. So we were able to go out and eat the next night. So at the end of the week, we came home on a Saturday, and the doctor gave us a manila envelope, and he said, I want you to do everything that is in here. And so when we looked, it was what had diagnosis, what we would give to the doctor, how she was supposed to be treated. And I read all that, and then I saw a little tract, and I knew what it was, but I didn't think Fred did. And I said, here's some little book. You want me to read that? And he said, yeah. So I read it, and it was a man's testimony of how he got saved. And I told Fred, I said, I have really worried about your salvation. He said, well, you don't have to worry anymore. He said, during this time, he said, I told God, take my eyes and give them to her. Whatever it took. He said, but finally I think I must have hit on it, because I told him that if he would give Lisa back her eyesight, I would serve him. So God gave Lisa back her eyesight, and Fred served the Lord until he died. And so it was God's way of getting Fred's attention. So God not only gave us a miracle by restoring Lisa's eyesight, a miracle of Fred being born again, but he showed us his love, his grace, and mercy, and comfort at a time that was one of the most traumatic events of my life. Y'all, let me tell you, we serve a mighty God. Don't miss out on this blessed life. If you don't know him, why not? So listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks.